Okay, so in this walkthrough, I'm going to walk through how to use AWS Elastic Beanstalk to deploy a .NET application. So again, we're going to be utilizing Elastic Beanstalk, which simply is platform as a service, as a way to quickly stand up applications, and it handles most of the heavy lifting in terms of AWS resources and such. So again, it's really kind of geared towards developers to kind of a quick way to just deploy an application out. And then again, everything is handled under the covers. There's really not much that you need to do, although you have the ability to go in and tweak the stack that gets created. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So a few things we'll have to do before we get into the actual deployment is, first off, is we need to make sure we set up the security appropriately so we can get access to Elastic Beanstalk. So again, as kind of everything we talked about, is always a good practice to create specific accounts and specific groups to give you just exactly what you need to do it. You don't want to give somebody full access to everything. So here I've done is I've created an account called me underneath my root account for AWS, and then within there I've set up permissions. I've created a group called developer, and for right now I've just assigned AWS Elastic Beanstalk full access to that group. And so this will give us what we need to go ahead and deploy to Elastic Beanstalk. Okay, so we've got to do that. Second thing is we need to set up some additional security credentials in order to be able to access the APIs from within Visual Studio 2019. So if you go to security credentials and drill down here to create access keys, you can create a new set of access keys. You can do up to 2, so it'll let you have 2 per account or per user account. So you go ahead and create that, and make sure we store off the CSV file or record the secret access key, because once you leave the screen, you can never get back to it. Okay, so I'm just going to download it to my I'm going to download it over to my downloads folder. So you can kind of see that here, and then we should be good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and move over to Visual Studio and see how that looks. All right, so here we are inside of Visual Studio 2019. So one thing that you'll want to do in here is, after you have VS 2019 installed, you're going to want to install the tools for AWS, and that'll give you access to this AWS Explorer, which we'll talk about in a second. But in order to install this tool, you're going to want to go to Extensions, Manage Extensions, and search for AWS Toolkit. So if you go here to search, and I've already have it installed, so I'm going to do it twice. But if you come in here into AWS and hit search, you'll see it pop up. You'll want to go ahead and do that install. It'll require you to close out of Visual Studio and come back in before it shows up. Once you install this toolkit, you'll have access to this AWS Explorer, and you can get to that. If it's not immediately showing up for you, you should be able to get to it from within the View menu, so you can get to it from here. All right, so and here's where you're going to set up the profiles to kind of connect you to the API. Now, remember a few seconds ago, we went ahead and created some access keys. So in order to allow the API to kind of know who you are, what rights you have, we need to provide that set of access keys and create a profile. By default, you get one called, by default, his name is default. And I'll just edit that. And what you're going to do here is, and this is an old one that I had in here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. You're going to take that access key and secret key that we downloaded, and you're going to want to populate that into this dialog. So I'm going to go ahead and take what I got from AWS just a few seconds ago, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. Be careful with these IDs. Obviously, you want to kind of make sure that these are not. These are not things that you share, because whatever rights you've given the user through these access keys, they have access to everything, right? So this is essentially kind of allowing you to get to the API without actually having to physically log in. So again, you want to protect this access key and this secret key, and you can, if you feel like it's been compromised, or it's a good idea to maybe periodically get rid of these and recreate new ones. You saw how easy it was to do in that dialog. You can always just delete the ones that are there and recreate them, come into this dialog, and recreate new ones. So if for some reason you think that somehow someone got access to it. But just remember that This here essentially gets you access to AWS as whatever account those keys were created under. So if you happen to have a user that has admin privileges and you gave somehow those secret access keys got out, they have access to everything underneath your account. So you could be in for a rude awakening of being charged for things that you didn't intend on. But so just protect those. But once you do that, we can click OK. And now we have set up this profile. So now anything that I do through the AWS Explorer, you'll be doing on behalf of that user. So for example, I can come in here and I can, for example, drill into my EC2s, and I can see any kind of instances I have running or declared. You can kind of see here that I don't really have anything currently showing up, but let's just see if we can get connected again and see here. So here we go. There's my clients. So you can get access and see what resources you have actually declared. I have in this case I've got a couple of EC2 instances. As a matter of fact, what I'm looking at right here, I'm running it through an EC2 instance. So that's kind of where you're seeing that there. Anyway, so we have access to all of that. And one we're going to talk about mostly today is Elastic Beanstalk. So let's go through how we create an application and deploy it to Elastic Beanstalk. We'll try that now. All right, so here I am inside of Visual Studio 2019, and I'm just going to create a new project. And the project I'm going to search for is, I'm going to search for C#, and I'm going to look for AWS.NET Core Web Applications. So select that one, select Next, and I'm going to call this one my awesome web app. All right, and I'm just going to pick the default here for that. And then keep going here, keep going through the wizard here. I'm going to pick this as an MVC application, so you have access to any of these other application types. But again, mostly a lot of the times what I'm working on is these kinds, so I'll just use MVC. But if you were going to do an API RESTful service, you can pick that one. If you want to create an Angular app, obviously you can pick any of those other templates. I'm going to leave the rest of this all to be the same here, and I'm going to go ahead and create that. Give it a second for it to finish creating the application. Okay, once the application has been created, you can come over here to the Solution Explorer, and you can kind of see the entire project here that you have. We're going to go ahead and hit Control F5 and just make sure it runs locally. Let that thing go, and once it compiles and runs, yeah, this is the first time you're using the application. You can trust a self-signed certificate just for development purposes. It's okay to do this. Obviously, in the real world, you would have a real SSL certificate, but for development purposes, Microsoft provides one to use IIS Express to make it easy for developers so they don't have to worry about signing certificates. Go ahead and click yes there. Yes, we're going to go ahead and allow that on localhost. And if all goes well, we should see our application here. There it is. There's our welcome page, and everything's ready to go. Okay. So now that we've confirmed that the website actually works locally and such. It's kind of a very simple website. Once we know that this application works correctly locally, we're going to go ahead and deploy it to Elastic Beanstalk so we can actually put it out into AWS. So let's do that next. All right, so now that we've got the application here and we installed the AWS toolkits, it gives us a few things other than like I showed you earlier, the AWS Explorer. You also have a couple other things that it added into our menus, and one of the things is the ability to quickly create an Elastic Beanstalk application. So the way you do that is right-click on the project, so in Solution Explorer, and you'll see this Publish to AWS Elastic Beanstalk. You're going to select that. All right, and again, it's going to want to know which profile. Again, this is kind of your lifeline back to whatever account you're using. So you pick which profile you're going to do this on behalf of, and then you also pick which region you want it to go to, and you have the option to create a new application. And if you wanted to redeploy, after you're making code changes, you would have the option to redeploy. But since I don't have an application, I'm going to go ahead and select that one first. I'm going to leave that the same. You have the option to pick an application. environment. So you have the ability through Elastic Beanstalk to set up an application, and those applications can have multiple environments underneath. And you can have a test environment, a development environment. So it's kind of an easy way to kind of stage things as you're developing as part of the CI/CD pipeline, if you will. But we'll just go ahead and pick dev, and the URL has to be unique. These URLs are unique across AWS, so we just check and make sure it's working. Okay, that is going to be basically our URL back to our application once we're fully deployed. And I just check to make sure that URL is available. It looks good. Go ahead and click next. And here's where you can kind of set up some of how you want the application to be deployed. So I'm doing this application as an ASP.NET Core application, which is cross-platform. So it has the ability to run on Windows, but it can also be deployed to Linux. So I'm going to pick Linux here just so I can have the ability to run this on a Linux platform and not Windows. You have the ability to pick your instance type. I'm going to pick a smaller one here. Let's see if I can find one that's a little smaller. T2 Micro. All right, we'll pick that one. Pick T2 Micro. Now, when you do this, you also have to pick a key pair. Remember, whenever you're creating EC2 instances, you have to provide a key pair so that we can pass credentials. So just pick a key pair you have. I'm going to pick one here for one of the client key pairs I know I have access to. If you don't do this correctly, everything will still work, except you won't be able to actually shell into the EC2 instance if you ever wanted to. So it's always better, obviously, to pick a key pair that you have created. Anyway, so we do that. We don't need to use anything special. It's just going to be a single instance. But if you wanted to, we can set up a load balancer. We can set up some rolling deployments and some of the other features and capabilities of Elastic Beanstalk. We're just going to pick the defaults here. Click next. We have to give an application so that it has a role so that the credentials can be appropriately assigned to whatever resources we're creating. So we'll just pick the defaults on that as well. Click next here. And we're going to go ahead and just leave all these. This is basically telling us how we're going to set it up. So we have the ability to say whether we want it to be a release version or is it going to be a debug version. What framework we're using. We're using .NET Core 3.1, so we'll leave that the same. And leave all that. Everything else is good here. Here's kind of a confirmation. Let's go ahead and deploy it. So now behind the scene, what's happening, and you can kind of see it in the output window at the bottom here, it's basically building up an entire application package, and it's going to send all of that up to AWS. It's going to store it, and then it's going to then take that whole package and then deploy it according to what we set up. So it'll take a little bit for that to entire provision, and once it's done, we'll have access to the application. So let's let that run, and once it's finished, we should be able to connect into the application. All right, so once everything's done, it's been provisioned correctly, we should see a couple things up here. The status should say environment is healthy. So Elastic Beanstalk does have support for doing health checks to make sure the application is healthy. And when it becomes unhealthy, it can react and do things like redeploy a new version or completely rebuild the entire stack, if you will. But if everything looks good, we should be able to hit our link here, the URL for the application. And let's go ahead and try that. So we'll click it, and we'll go ahead and pick Google Chrome. And if all goes well, there's our application. So here it is out on AWS. It automatically got deployed. And if we kind of want to, we can jump over to AWS and actually look at some of what happened behind the scenes. So here I have the Elastic Beanstalk that environment. So if you're in AWS, just click on Elastic Beanstalk. This is the environment that we just provisioned through Visual Studio. So it's healthy, it's green. Here's our application name when it was created. I can drill into that, and I can kind of see some more health information. I can see what version it is being installed, and we can kind of see right here it's using .NET Core, and it's running on Amazon Linux 2. Okay, so it's deployed to Linux 2. I can see the different events and so forth. I can also go in here if I want. I can change the configuration, right? So there's quite a bit inside of Elastic Beanstalk that you do. So the screen from Visual Studio kind of gives you some of it, but obviously if you really needed to tweak this, you can kind of go into the Elastic Beanstalk's console itself, and you'd be able to kind of make whatever changes you want. So you can kind of see the health of the system, if there's any kind of health alarms. You can manage updates, and obviously you can click right and go to the application directly if you wanted to, just like we did. Okay, so with it being done like this, again, this kind of gets us a very easy way to deploy applications, and with very little. So it's, again, very little effort from a developer standpoint. They don't have to worry about what's happening. Visual Studio kind of does most of it for us. Okay, so if I wanted to, I can come in here and go back into my Visual Studio, and I can make a change. So I'll come down here. Let's just go into one of the views here. I'll go to the home page, and I'll just kind of make a quick little change here. I'll call it home page for my awesome app, building web apps, Internet Core. This is awesome. All right, we'll go ahead and save all that out there. And we'll just, if you want to now, since I made that change, if I want to have it deployed, I'll just come right back in here, publish to AWS Beanstalk once again. In this case, I'll just choose redeploy and click next and finish. I don't want to make any changes. And that's going to go off, and it's basically going to update everything in that environment. It's going to zip up a new package, send it up to AWS, and then redeploy it to my Elastic Beanstalk environment. And that may take a couple seconds for that to go through. Once it's done, we'll be able to see that change out on the website. All right, once it's done, I'll see here that it did the update, it deployed a new version, it completely updated the environment for me, so everything is ready to go. Then if I go back into my application and run it, I should see my changes. There they are. There's my change I made. This is awesome. And then obviously also the homepage itself, my homepage for my awesome app is in there as well. So it made those changes. So again, very easy to deploy applications out. Again, more for developers. It kind of gives them an easy way to deploy these applications. Again, it's a platform as a service and intended for application style deployments. And that wraps us up. One thing I'll just mention before we leave is it's always a good idea when you do these tutorials and such that you clean up whatever it is that you create. So if you're not, you're going to be getting charged for the various services. As a matter of fact, if you were to go back and look at AWS here, if I go to EC2, part of this was actually standing up an instance. So there is the application I just created. Okay, so that again got created. So when you do anything with Elastic Beanstalk, any resources you create, it doesn't cost anything for Elastic Beanstalk itself, by itself, but the services and the resources you create, you are charged for that. So it's always a good idea to remove those applications. So what I suggest is go into Elastic Beanstalk and just go ahead and delete that application or terminate the environment. Once you terminate the environment, it's going to make you confirm. Once you terminate the environment, it will then kill all the EC2 instance and any other resources that it created, so you aren't charged for it. Okay, and that wraps this up. Thanks so much.